My aunt stood up, lifted her glass, and said, "He's only marrying you for a green card." People laughed. I stood frozen. But what my fiancé did next made every single person fall silent, and then speechless. I always imagined my engagement party as a warm, glowy blur. You know the kind. String lights, champagne flutes clinking, my mom tearing up while my dad gives an awkward but heartfelt speech, and everyone smiling like love was contagious. Instead, what I got was humiliation dressed in a floral dress and red lipstick. We were halfway through the evening. The backyard looked magical. Mateo, my fiancé, had spent hours helping me hang fairy lights between the trees. My mom made her famous peach cobbler. My little cousins were running around with glow sticks. It should have been perfect. And for a while, it was. Mateo stood by my side, his hand warm around mine. He kept whispering how proud he was of me. My best friend Dana had just finished a speech that made me tear up. Then my Aunt Trish grabbed the mic. I should have known. She walked up in her usual overly dramatic way, clutching her wine glass like it was an award she'd earned. She adjusted her scarf, like the extra movement gave her words more weight, and looked straight at Mateo. Then she turned to the crowd and smirked. "I just want to say how thrilled I am that Naima is getting married," she began, her voice sugary sweet with something bitter underneath, especially to someone so international. There were a few chuckles, but I gave a tight smile. Maybe she was trying to be funny. But then she tilted her glass higher. "Let's all raise a toast to Mateo. I mean, marrying Naima for love is one thing, but for a green card? That's commitment." It was like someone hit pause on the entire party. There was silence, then a ripple of uncomfortable laughter, the kind that's too unsure to be a joke, too nervous to be kind. I just stood there. People were watching me. Some looked away, embarrassed. Others sipped their drinks like it was nothing, but no one said anything. Not my dad, who just stared down at his hands. Not my mom, who suddenly found the dessert table fascinating. And definitely not Jordan, my brother, who muttered yikes under his breath. I felt the heat crawl up my neck. My skin was on fire and freezing at the same time. Mateo was still holding my hand, but it felt different now. Stiff, uncertain. I didn't dare look at him. I didn't know what I'd find. I forced a laugh, a weak, awkward sound that caught in my throat. "Ignore her," I mumbled, more to myself than anyone else. "She's just being Trish." But inside, something cracked. It wasn't just the accusation. It was the way people reacted. The way no one stopped her. The way some of them laughed. Like this was acceptable. Like I was the fool. My engagement party had just become an interrogation, and I was the one on trial. Aunt Trish shrugged and handed the mic back like she hadn't just set a grenade off in the middle of my future. She walked away, smiling, sipping her wine. I stood there, blinking back tears I refused to let fall. Then, without a word, Mateo let go of my hand. I thought he was walking away. I thought I was about to watch him leave, humiliated, angry, ashamed. But instead he reached into his coat and pulled out a file. Thick, heavy, sealed tight. The kind of file you bring when you're ready to burn down every lie in the room. He took a deep breath, stepped forward and reached for the mic. And I'll never forget what he said next. Before the party, before the mic drop and the file and the silence, I honestly thought this would be one of the happiest nights of my life. I'm not someone who ever dreamed of a huge wedding. I don't like being the center of attention. I'd rather be behind the scenes, planning, organizing, making sure everyone else is having a good time. That's why the idea of an engagement party felt so big, so vulnerable. But Mateo wanted it, not for him, for me. He kept saying, "Naima, they need to see us happy. Really see us, not just in photos, in person." And I knew he was right. My family always assumed I'd marry someone just like them, someone from the neighborhood, someone familiar, someone they could understand at first glance. Mateo didn't check any of those boxes. He's Argentine. He speaks fluent English, but with an accent that draws attention in my mostly suburban, mostly conservative family. He's soft-spoken, thoughtful, a software developer with a quiet kind of brilliance that people overlook if they're not paying attention. But I saw him. I saw the way he listened, The way he stayed when things got hard. The way he made even my worst days feel like they were still worth something. We met 3 years ago at a volunteer event, a community tech literacy program for immigrant families. I was teaching ESL. He was helping set up the laptops. At first, I thought he was just polite. Then I noticed the way he stayed after every session, helping fix broken cables, organizing files, thanking every volunteer like it mattered. It did matter. We became friends. Then something more. When we finally started dating, I felt like I had found home in someone else's arms, and I naively thought that would be enough for my family. My mom, Judith, liked him from the start, but in a cautious way. She's the kind of woman who smiles through tension and prays behind closed doors. My dad, Eldon, never said much, but his silence said plenty. He'd ask Mateo polite questions, but there was always that distant look in his eyes, like he was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then there was Aunt Trish. She's not just rude, she's surgical. She knows exactly where your soft spots are and aims directly for them. She says she's honest, but really she just lacks filters. Every gathering with her feels like walking through a minefield of backhanded compliments and barbed jokes. So when we planned the engagement party, I hesitated about inviting her, but my mom insisted. She's family, she said, and it'll be good for her to see you both together. Maybe it'll change her mind. I should have trusted my gut. The party was hosted in my parents' backyard, a space I'd known since childhood. Birthday parties, 4th of July cookouts, even my awkward middle school graduation picnic. Mateo and I spent the whole week stringing lights across the trees, picking the playlist, folding linen napkins. My cousin Mia handled the food, my best friend Dana offered to help with drinks, and Jordan, my sarcastic but surprisingly helpful younger brother, set up the speakers. The evening started beautifully. People were smiling, laughing. Mateo looked stunning in his navy blue jacket, and I felt like I was floating in my cream lace dress. He held my hand the whole time, lightly squeezing it when someone came up to offer congratulations. I remember thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the turning point where everyone finally sees him the way I do. Maybe we'll leave tonight feeling like we belong, like we're not just tolerated, but truly embraced. I was wrong, because beneath the surface smiles, the clinking glasses, and the polite questions, I could feel it. The undercurrent, the silent side eyes, the forced laughter when Mateo answered something with an accent, the long pauses after I introduced him as my future husband. There was one moment, just before the toasts, when I caught Aunt Trish watching us. Her expression wasn't confused. It was smug, like she knew something the rest of us didn't. Like she had rehearsed whatever line she was about to drop, and I should have known then. I should have felt the storm coming, but I didn't. I just smiled, thanked people for coming, and leaned into Mateo's shoulder like the moment was untouchable. Until it wasn't. I wish I could say there was a build-up, that I saw it coming, that I had time to brace myself. But sometimes, a moment doesn't knock. You just look up, and it's already ripping through the room. It started the second Aunt Trish took the mic. It wasn't even her turn to speak. My mom had asked Dana, my best friend since 4th grade, to say a few words, followed by my dad, then a short toast from Mateo and me. Aunt Trish wasn't on the list, but she walked right up like she owned the evening, smiling that smug little smile she always wore when she knew she had a grenade in her pocket. She tapped the mic twice and cleared her throat, already too loud. "Hello, hello, family," she chirped, raising her wine glass. "What a lovely evening, what a special occasion, what a strategic opportunity." People chuckled, not everyone, but enough. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but my grip on Mateo's hand tightened. He squeezed back. Then she turned to Mateo and said, "So Mateo, how long do you have left on your visa again?" Laughter again, nervous, confused, uncomfortable. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but she just steamrolled through it. "I mean, no offense," she continued, waving a hand like that made everything fine. "I'm sure you two love each other, of course. But let's be honest here. We all know marriage is the fastest path to a green card. And Naima's always been a little too trusting, bless her heart." Bless her heart. Like that made it okay. There was a weird noise in my ears, like rushing wind, My legs were still, but my insides were unraveling. I glanced around. People weren't laughing anymore. Some were shifting uncomfortably, staring at the ground. My father's jaw was tight, but he said nothing. My mom looked like she might cry. Jordan stood near the back with his arms crossed, but his face was unreadable. And Mateo, he didn't flinch. He didn't roll his eyes or turn red. He just looked at her with this strange calm I couldn't read. I didn't know if he was angry, embarrassed, or just stunned. I tried to speak again, tried to smile and deflect. "Okay, thank you, Trish. I think that's—" But she kept going. "To Mateo, the fiancé, the charmer, the American dreamer," she said, raising her glass higher. "Cheers to finding love and citizenship in one shot." That time, no one laughed. There was only silence. It was the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels full of judgment, full of suspicion, full of 100 quiet conversations no one says out loud. I felt everyone's eyes on me. Not on us, on me, as if to say, "Is it true? Are you really that naive?" I let go of Mateo's hand. My fingers were trembling. My throat was dry. I wanted to run, but my feet stayed frozen to the deck. I thought about all the little moments over the past year, every family gathering, every awkward question, every hesitant smile, and I realized something gutting. They'd been thinking this the whole time. No one had said it out loud, but it had been floating under the surface, and Aunt Trish had just been the one bold or cruel enough to say it. I glanced at Mateo. His posture had changed. He no longer looked like a guest at a party. He looked like a man with a purpose. He let go of my hand and stepped forward. I thought he was leaving. I thought, this is it. I've brought him into a house that doesn't want him. I've allowed someone to insult the person I love in front of everyone, and I didn't stop it. But he didn't leave. He reached inside his coat and pulled out a file, a thick one, the kind that doesn't just speak, it proves. The room watched as he walked to the mic, and then quietly but firmly, Mateo said, "There's something you should all know." Mateo stood under the lights we had strung up together just days before. The same lights I had picked out on a whim because they looked soft and romantic. Now, they felt like a spotlight, and every eye in the backyard was fixed on him. He held the mic with one hand and the thick file in the other. I could see the outline of papers pressed flat inside, neatly bound, not thrown together, prepared, intentional. I felt something twist in my stomach. I didn't know what he was about to say. I didn't know what was inside that folder. But something in the way he looked, not angry, not flustered, just clear, made me realize he had planned this. He wasn't blindsided by Aunt Trish. He had been ready for her, for them. Mateo took a breath. "I didn't come here tonight to defend myself," he said, scanning the crowd. "But clearly some of you came to question me. So let's be clear." He opened the file. "I met Naima 2.5 years ago while volunteering at a community literacy program. I was there helping install new computers and organize digital classes. She was teaching English to refugees and immigrant children, many of whom didn't speak a word of it before they sat in her classroom." There were murmurs, not loud ones, just soft, surprise noises like air being sucked from lungs. Some people genuinely didn't know that part of our story. She didn't know my immigration status. She didn't even ask. For months, we worked side by side, me in the tech lab, her in the classroom. What she didn't know was that my sister, Sophia, was one of her students. That got my attention. Mateo turned slightly so the mic caught every word. My sister was terrified. She'd been through a lot. She had panic attacks just walking into new buildings. But Naima saw her. She helped her through every lesson. She stayed after class to read with her, write with her, even bake cookies to bring to her birthday. He flipped to a page in the folder and held it up. "This is a letter my sister wrote to her teacher 6 months later. She said, 'Thank you for making me feel smart when the world made me feel broken.'" My throat tightened. Mateo continued, "When my sister needed urgent dental surgery and didn't qualify for insurance, Naima helped raise money anonymously through her community group to pay for it. She didn't want credit. She didn't tell anyone, including me." He turned a page. "This is the GoFundMe campaign she started under a fake name. The funds went directly to the hospital." People were staring at me now, not with suspicion, with something else, something warmer. conflicted maybe, but more open. She didn't love me because I needed a green card, and I didn't love her because she was kind. I loved her because she was the first person who made my sister smile again, because she never asked for anything in return. Because when I told her about my past, about the years my family and I spent undocumented, scared, she listened without flinching. He paused, closing the file slowly. I've had my green card for over a year, approved through my employer. I never needed this marriage for citizenship. Dead silence. He looked toward Aunt Trish. She wouldn't meet his gaze. I asked Naima to marry me because I wanted to build a life with her, not a visa, a home. Then he turned to me. "And I brought this," he said, raising the file slightly, "because I had a feeling someone here would try to rewrite our story. And I wanted to remind them, you don't get to define our love based on your fears." He placed the file gently on the table next to the mic stand. "That's all." Then he stepped back. For a moment, no one moved. No one clapped. Not because it wasn't powerful, but because it was too powerful. Like we were all trying to process what had just happened. And me? I was standing there, heart pounding, trying to hold back the kind of tears that don't come from sadness or shame, but something else entirely. Validation, pride, love. Mateo had just done something no one in my family ever dared to do. He stood up to them. Not with rage, not with accusations, but with truth, with receipts, with grace. He walked back toward me slowly, eyes never leaving mine, and suddenly I felt steadier. I felt seen. I didn't realize I was crying until Mateo reached me and gently brushed a tear from my cheek. His hand was warm, familiar. It steadied me. But the moment still didn't feel real. People were staring, not with malice now, but with something closer to respect, or guilt, or maybe both. The file he laid down might as well have been a mirror, one that forced them to look at who they'd become, how easily they'd judged, how quietly they'd gone along with it. I hadn't said a word yet, not during Aunt Trish's speech, not during Mateo's, but now my legs carried me forward almost on their own, toward the mic, toward the silence. I looked out across the yard, at the fairy lights we'd hung like hope between the trees, at the half-eaten desserts and the untouched glasses of champagne. My father still hadn't moved. My mother was blinking rapidly, the way she did when she was trying not to cry. Aunt Trish had finally stepped back, arms folded across her chest, face unreadable, and behind her my cousin Maya had a hand over her mouth. I took a deep breath. "I almost didn't want this party," I began. My voice cracked a little, but I kept going. Not because I didn't want to celebrate, but because I was afraid this exact thing would happen. Eyes widened. No one interrupted. "I knew some of you doubted Mateo. Some of you questioned why I was with him. Some of you whispered things you thought I didn't hear." I looked straight at Aunt Trish. "And some of you didn't bother whispering." She blinked, said nothing. I continued. What I didn't expect was that the person I thought would be the most embarrassed tonight would actually be the most prepared, the most dignified, the most honest. I turned toward Mateo and gave him a soft smile. He didn't have to say any of that. He didn't owe you proof. He didn't owe you a file. But he gave it to you anyway, not to clear his name, but to clear mine. I looked back at my family, because somewhere along the way, some of you forgot who I am. You forgot the kind of woman I've worked to become. You looked at our love and assumed it had to be a transaction, like it was too much for me to be chosen, freely, fully, and forever. A small, startled breath came from the left. I saw Jordan shift, arms now uncrossed. He looked stunned. My dad's mouth twitched, but still, no words. "I'm not angry," I said, shaking my head slowly. "I'm disappointed, deeply, because this could have been a beautiful night. It could have been a night where we all showed up for each other, a night where Mateo felt welcomed instead of tested, a night where I didn't have to explain why someone like him might love someone like me." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Empathy, maybe. Agreement. I pointed gently to the file still sitting on the table. "That file doesn't just show who Mateo is. It shows who I am, what I've done, what I care about. And if you needed paperwork to remember that, then maybe it's not him you should be questioning. That was the moment. The room didn't erupt in applause. It didn't need to. There was a stillness, a shift, one I could feel in my bones. And then, of all people, my dad stood up. He walked over to the mic, slowly, deliberately. Everyone turned. He didn't say much, just looked at Mateo and said, "I was wrong." The words were simple, but they landed like thunder. I felt Mateo stiffen beside me. He didn't expect that. None of us did. Then my mom stepped forward too, reaching for my hand. "She raised you well," she told Mateo softly, "whoever your mother is." Mateo smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He was still processing, I think. We both were. Aunt Trish stayed quiet. She never apologized. I didn't expect her to, but when I glanced her way, she didn't meet my eyes, and honestly, that was enough. The night didn't go the way I thought it would. It went better, because for the first time in my life, I didn't just keep the peace. I claimed it. We didn't stay much longer after that. A few more guests offered quiet congratulations as we packed up the leftover food and folded away the decorations. No one really danced. No one clinked their glasses for a kiss. It was less a celebration and more a reckoning, but I didn't mind, because something shifted that night, not just between me and Mateo, but inside me. For most of my life, I thought keeping the peace was the same as keeping myself safe. I thought if I stayed quiet, smiled through the discomfort, and didn't make waves, people would eventually respect me, maybe even love me. But I realized at my own engagement party, standing under fairy lights and fake smiles, that peace built on silence isn't peace at all. It's surrender. That night, I stopped surrendering. After the guests left, Mateo and I sat on the back steps of my parents' house, the house where I grew up, the house where I learned to shrink. He held my hand and neither of us said anything for a while. We just listened to the crickets, the occasional car in the distance, the sound of my family cleaning up inside, quieter than usual. Then he finally spoke. "Are you okay?" I thought about it, then nodded. "I think I am." And I meant it. Because the truth came out. Not just his truth, but mine. The truth of our story. The truth of my voice. And once that happened, once it was out there, I didn't feel small anymore. The next morning, my mom came into my childhood bedroom with a cup of tea. She sat on the edge of the bed and didn't say much at first. Then she whispered, "I'm proud of you." I almost cried right there. She told me that when Mateo spoke, she saw a side of him she hadn't seen before. And she saw a side of me she'd forgotten. The girl who used to argue with teachers, who stood up for her classmates, who volunteered for every cause even when it meant skipping parties. She saw the girl I used to be before I started biting my tongue around this family. "Don't lose her again," my mom said gently, placing her hand on mine. "She's stronger than you think." A few days later, we flew back to our apartment in Chicago. Mateo was quiet on the plane, but once we landed, he looked at me and said, "Thank you for standing beside me, even when it was uncomfortable." I laughed. "You stood beside me first." And that's what it came down to. Love isn't just about laughter and shared interests. It's about who shows up when things get ugly, who holds your hand when people snicker, who speaks when you can't, who tells the truth, not to win, but to heal. We had our wedding 6 months later, not in a big ballroom, not with the whole family, just a small ceremony in a botanical garden with a few close friends, a handful of relatives who earned the right to be there, and the pastor who married my parents 30 years ago. No one gave a speech unless we asked them to, and Aunt Trish didn't get an invitation. We still hear whispers sometimes, from distant cousins, from people who weren't there that night and only got the story secondhand. But we don't flinch anymore, because we know what's real. We lived it. Sometimes, people think standing up for love means grand gestures or fairy tale moments, but most of the time, it just means telling the truth in a room full of silence. Choosing each other again and again, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. So here's what I learned. You don't need everyone's approval. You don't need to explain your heart to people who've already made up their minds. And you definitely don't need to prove your worth to those who never bothered to look closely in the first place. What you need is truth, love, and the courage to speak when it matters most. And if someone ever questions your story, your love, or your worth, don't hand them your silence. Hand them the truth.